Today I am going to explain about transaction concept in DBMS. In this topic I am going to explain about what is a transaction, what are the different states of a transaction, and what are the different properties of a transaction. First I will go what is a transaction. Transaction means a sequence of operation. We can say it's a transaction. The operations can be read operation, can be write operation, can be update, can be delete, etc. So few examples of transaction: railway reservation, second example of transaction, banking transaction, airline reservation. These are the few examples of transaction. Next, I am going to explain it. Now I will be explaining about different types of states in a transaction. There are 6 states in a transaction. One is called active state, second one is partially committed, third one is committed state, fourth one is failed state, fifth one is aborted state, and last one is terminated state. This all the state I will explain with an example. With this example, so first one is active state. When the transaction is going to begin, it will go to the active state. So in the active state, it can either read operation, it can do either read operation or write operation, it can read the data, it can write the data, it can do any kind of, either it may be update or delete operation. So then it will reach to the partially committed state. So what is partially committed state? When the transaction is executing, it is executing, but it is not completed fully, and it is not stored also in permanently in the database. So when the transaction is committed, it is when the transaction is completed, it has to, the completed transaction should be stored in the database. So before storing in the database, that you can say the transaction is in partially committed state. After it will finish the execution, it will go to the partially committed state. Then after partially committed state, it should be permanently stored in the database. So that is permanent stored. Then it will called as the transaction is committed successfully, and it will go to the committed state. After committed state, it will reach to the terminated state. But before committed state, during the execution or partially committed state, the transaction failure occur. It may be a database failure, it can be a transaction failure. Then it will go to the failed state. Then during the failed state, it is the transaction has to be rolled back. Then after rollback, it will go to the aborted state. Then it will reach to the terminated state. So these are the different states of transaction. Next topic. Now I will explain about acid properties of transaction. This is very important in the transaction concept, and every transaction must follow these 4 properties. So acid properties, simple term, it is called A is for atomicity, C is called consistency, I is for isolation, D is for durability. First I will explain what is atomicity. Atomicity in simple term we can say either or none. What is the meaning of this? If the transaction execute, it should execute fully or it should not execute at all. For example, I am taking 2 accounts, account A and account B. If the account A wants to transfer money to account B, so initial amount for the account A is 5,000 and initial balance for account B is 4,000. If the transaction the account A wants to transfer 1,000 rupees to account B, then after the transaction completed, the final amount for the transaction A should be 4,000 and for B it should be 5,000. That means 1,000 should be deducted from the account A and 1,000 should be credited to account B. Then the final amount for the account A should be 4,000 and for B it should be 5,000. Then we can say this is a single unit of transaction. If during that transaction from account A to account B, if any transaction failure occurs, maybe a database or a network failure, and the balance is the balance is not proper, that means account A money has been debited but it is not reached to account B, then we will say the transaction is not completed and it is not a single unit of transaction. So if it wants to execute, it should execute fully. That means it has to debited from the account A and it has to reach to account B, and the final amount it should show is 4,000 for account A and 5,000 for account B. Then it is a single unit of transaction. Then next property is consistency. As I told you this example, if the final amount is not reflecting properly, that is 4,000 it should be for A and 5,000 should be for B. But when money has been deducted from account A and after that some network failure happened or some transaction failure happened, the money has been not credited to account B, then the amount it will show is account A will be 4,000, also for account B also 4,000. Then we can say that it is not in consistent state and the value is not correct. So the transaction must keep in the database in a valid state. So it is not in a valid state and it is showing the wrong balance. So this is not in consistent state. So if it is executing successfully, the final amount should be 4,000 for account A and 5,000 should be for account B. If it is happens, then that transaction is in consistent state. And the third property of the transaction is isolation. If multiple transactions are executing simultaneously or parallelly in a transaction, if a multiple transactions are executing parallelly, then they should execute independently without interfering in their operation. Then last property of a transaction is durability. If the transaction is executing successfully, then it should be the database updated value should be stored in the database permanently. This is called durability. And this is the all four properties of transaction. Thank you very much.